The silence of the abyssal plain was a pressure you felt in your bones, a physical weight that bore down on the soul as much as the hull of the submersible. Dr. Eris Thorne felt it as a low hum in his teeth, a constant reminder that he was 6 miles beneath the surface of the Pacific, in a place less explored than the moon and infinitely more hostile. He was a theoretical xenolinguist, a man who built careers on deciphering languages that had never been spoken, from worlds that might not exist. His work was a dance of logic and imagination, confined to sterile university labs and the glowing screens of supercomputers. He had never imagined his theories would lead him here, to the Triton Deep Sea Research Array, a clandestine facility built by the formidable Ethelred Security Corporation, anchored to the seafloor like a metallic tick on the hide of a leviathan. The summons had been cryptic, urgent, and backed by a non-disclosure agreement, so dense it felt like a threat in itself. For 2 weeks, he had been their guest, or perhaps their prisoner, tasked with the single greatest challenge of his life, a sphere. It rested now in the central containment chamber, a perfect obsidian orb 10 meters in diameter, floating in a pressurized gel medium. It had been found buried deep in the sediment, an object of impossible smoothness that absorbed all light and defied all scans. No drills could scratch it, no radiation could penetrate it. It was, for all intents and purposes, a perfect black spot in the universe, and it was covered in writing. The symbols glowed with a soft, internal silver light, shifting in patterns that were not quite random and not quite repetitive. They were elegant, complex, and utterly alien. Eris had spent every waking moment trying to crack their code, his mind a whirlwind of comparative grammar and hypothetical syntax. He felt he was on the cusp of a breakthrough, a pattern that hinted at a language not of sound or sight, but of pure mathematics, of concepts woven into the fabric of reality itself. Another dead end. Dr. The voice, sharp and laced with impatience, belonged to Director Eva Rostova. She stood on the observation gantry above the containment chamber, a severe figure in a perfectly tailored black suit that seemed as out of place in the utilitarian station as a wolf in a sheep pen. She ran Ethelred's Special Projects Division with an efficiency that bordered on ruthless, and she viewed the sphere not with wonder, but with the cold calculus of an asset appraiser. "It's not a dead end, Director," Eris replied, not looking up from his console. He gestured to the holographic display where a particular glyph pulsed. "It's a lock. This symbol, it's a constant, a fulcrum around which the others pivot. It doesn't represent a word, it represents a state of being. Equilibrium. Stasis. A quiet." Rostova descended the spiral staircase, her heels clicking with an authority that echoed in the vast chamber. "Quiet is not a commodity. Doctor, Ethelred has invested billions in this facility, in your expertise. We need something more tangible than philosophical concepts. We need to know what it is, what it does, and how we can use it." Eris finally turned to face her, his gentle academic eyes meeting her predatory gaze. "With respect, Director. That's like asking a caveman who's just discovered fire how to build a nuclear reactor. This writing is older than any human civilization. Its complexity suggests a mind, or minds, that operate on a level we can barely comprehend. The very act of observing it might be a form of intrusion we are not prepared for. The message I'm slowly piecing together, it's not an invitation. It feels more like a warning." Rostova scoffed, a faint, dismissive smile playing on her lips. "Warnings are for the weak. We are not some primitive tribe cowering before a thunderstorm. We are humanity, the species that split the atom, that walks on other worlds. We do not fear the dark. We dissect it, She gestured to the team of engineers waiting by the control panel for the manipulator arms. "We've been patient. We've given you time for your academic poetry. Now, we're moving to Phase 2. We're going to touch it." A cold dread washed over Eris. "Director, that is profoundly unwise. We don't know what kind of defense mechanisms it might have. We don't know if its surface is reactive, if it emits some kind of field. We will know shortly." She interrupted, her voice leaving no room for argument. "Proceed." "Mr. Gian." A lead engineer, a man named Gian, gave a hesitant nod and began manipulating a set of controls. From the ceiling, a massive, multi-jointed robotic arm descended, its pincer-like claw aiming for the surface of the sphere. The arm was designed to withstand thousands of atmospheres of pressure, to cut through battleship armor. Against the silent, black orb, it looked like a child's toy. Eris watched, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The air in the chamber grew thick with anticipation. The only sound was the low hum of the station's life support and the quiet whir of the manipulator arm's servos. The claw drew closer, its metallic fingers extending. The moment the tip made contact, a conic so gentle it should have been imperceptible, everything changed. It wasn't an explosion. There was no flash of light, no concussive blast. There was only sound. Yet it was a sound that made no noise. It was a psychic scream that erupted directly inside every mind in the station. Eris clutched his head in a searing pain lancing through his skull as his consciousness was flooded with an impossible torrent of information. He saw galaxies being born and dying in the span of a heartbeat. He felt the thoughts of a billion alien minds, all screaming a single, unified concept: hush. Then came the silence, not the quiet of the deep sea, but a profound and terrifying emptiness. The psychic scream vanished, replaced by a wave of pure cognitive erasure. It washed over the station like a tide of nothingness. Eris watched in horror as Director Rostova, the woman of iron will and unshakable confidence, simply stopped. Her eyes went vacant, the sharp intelligence draining away like water from a shattered glass. A thin line of drool trickled from the corner of her mouth. She looked down at her hands as if she had never seen them before. The engineer, Gian, stared at his console, his face a mask of utter confusion. He reached for a control, his fingers fumbling, his mind clearly unable to recall the complex motor skills he had honed over a lifetime. All around the chamber, scientists and security personnel slumped in their chairs or stood frozen in place, their minds wiped clean. They were not dead, not physically harmed, but they were gone. Their personalities, their memories, their very sense of self had been scooped out, leaving behind empty human shells. Eris felt the wave coming for him, a cold, creeping void at the edges of his mind. He fought against it, his brain, so accustomed to wrestling with abstract and complex systems, desperately trying to build a firewall of logic against the encroaching emptiness. He focused on the glyph he had identified, the symbol for stasis, for quiet. He held the concept in his mind like a shield. It was a foolish, desperate act, like trying to stop a tsunami with a piece of driftwood. But somehow, it worked. The wave of erasure washed over him, but not through him. It felt like being submerged in icy water. He was battered and chilled to the core, but he did not drown. He could feel pieces of himself flaking away: the name of his childhood pet, the taste of his favorite meal, the face of his third-grade teacher, but his core identity, his name, Eris Thorn, and his purpose, to understand, remained intact. He staggered back, gasping, the psychic residue in the air making him nauseous. The sphere was unchanged, floating silently in its gel, its silver glyphs now pulsing with a slow, steady, satisfied rhythm. It had not attacked them. It had simply shushed them. It had enforced its quiet. Suddenly, a hand grabbed his arm, startling him. He spun around to see Kyle, one of the station's janitors. Kale was an old man with a face like a worn sea chart, his eyes a pale, cloudy blue. He was always in the background, mopping floors, cleaning vents, a silent, unassuming presence nobody ever really noticed. But now, those cloudy eyes were sharp with an ancient, piercing intelligence. There was no trace of the mental void in his expression. "You are resilient," Kale said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that was far more commanding than the simple janitor should possess. "Most are not. The lullaby is not meant to be resisted." "The lullaby?" Aris stammered, his mind still reeling. What was that? What happened to them? "It did what it was designed to do," Kyle said, his gaze sweeping over the blank-faced crew. "It ended the noise. The sphere is not a relic, Doctor. It is a key and a lock, a component in a system so vast it safeguards a truth you cannot yet comprehend." He pulled Eris toward a service corridor. "Ethelred, in its arrogance, has turned the key. The song has begun, and it will not stop with this station. We must leave. Now." Eris stumbled after him, his legs shaky. "Who are you? A caretaker? A listener? One who has honored the warning for millennia?" KL keyed a code into a maintenance panel, and a heavy blast door hissed open, revealing a small two-man escape submersible Eris had never seen on any station schematic. Rostova and her corporation were not the first to find one of these. They are merely the most recent in a long line of fools who thought the universe was theirs to command. As they scrambled into the cramped cockpit, Kale initiated the launch sequence. Through the thick quartz viewport, Eris could see the main containment chamber. The robotic arm that had touched the sphere was now twitching erratically, its programming wiped, operating on ghost electrical signals. Director Rostova was on her knees, trying to fit a data slate into her mouth like a teething infant. The sight was more chilling than any act of violence. This was not destruction. It was a fundamental undoing of what it meant to be sentient. "The warning," Eris whispered, his mind finally connecting the dots, the translation of the glyphs he'd been chasing coalescing into a single, horrifying phrase. The message on the sphere. I almost had it. It wasn't a history or a dedication. Kael looked at him, his ancient eyes filled with a profound sorrow as the submersible detached from the station and began its ascent into the crushing blackness. "No, Doctor, it wasn't a history. It was a label, a simple declaration of contents left by the creators for anyone foolish enough to read it." Eris felt a tremor of true, cosmic fear, a dread that dwarfed the claustrophobic terror of the deep sea. He finally understood. What did it say? Kael's voice was grim. "Herein lies the end of thought. The ascent was a journey through shades of impossible black." As the small submersible, which Kael called the Vern, spiraled upward, the crushing pressure of the deep slowly relented, but the psychological weight of what Eris had witnessed only intensified. He sat strapped into the co-pilot's seat, the faint green glow of the instruments illuminating Kael's craggy profile as he expertly guided the craft. The silence in the cockpit was a fragile thing, easily broken by the torrent of questions swirling in Eris's mind. "They're just empty," Eris finally asked, the words feeling clumsy and inadequate. "Rostova, the entire crew, their minds are gone." Kael didn't take his eyes off the sonar display, which painted a ghostly, three-dimensional image of the underwater canyons around them. Not gone, silenced. The lullaby doesn't destroy consciousness. It unravels it. It smooths the complex folds of thought, memory, and personality until all that remains is a blank slate. A creature of simple instinct. It's a cognitive entropy wave. The sphere, its proper name is a silencer. It's a celestial failsafe. Eris shook his head, trying to fit the term failsafe to the horror he'd seen. A failsafe for what against what noise? Kael said simply. The universe is full of it. Ambition, conquest, the desperate clamor of civilizations reaching for a power they can't control. Occasionally, a species becomes too loud. It begins to tamper with the fundamental principles of reality dimensional engineering, temporal mechanics, the kind of science that can unravel the fabric of a galaxy. When that happens, a silencer activates. It sings its lullaby, and the noise stops. The species is reset to a pre-sapient state, given a chance to evolve again, hopefully along a quieter path. Eris felt a profound chill that had nothing to do with the deep-sea temperatures. He was a linguist who had dreamed of first contact, of a universe teeming with vibrant, diverse intelligence. Kael was describing a cosmic gardener who pruned civilizations like overgrown weeds. And your order, you knew it was there. We are the Silent Watch, Kael explained, his voice low and steady, a counterpoint to the sub's humming systems. We are not a large group, a few dozen at any given time, scattered across the globe. We don't have a name you would recognize or a charter filed in any government office. We are a lineage, passed down through millennia. We are humanity's memory. We remember the last time the sky fell, the last time a lullaby was sung on this world. Eris stared at him, on Earth, when long before the first stone was shaped into a tool. There was a civilization here before us, a race of beings who mapped the stars with thought and built cities of pure energy. They grew too loud. A silencer, buried deep in the mantle, woke up and sang them to sleep. We are descended from the few who were shielded, primitives hiding in deep caves, their minds too simple to be considered noise. Our oldest duty has been to keep humanity from making the same mistake. We watch the other silencers, the ones left behind by the gardeners, and we do our best to steer our own kind away from them. The pieces began to click into place for Eris, the sphere in the Triton array. Ethelred didn't find it. You led them to it, didn't you? Or you allowed them to find it? Kael's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. That was a mistake, a calculated risk that failed. We have been monitoring Ethelred for decades. Their research into quantum entanglement and neural networking was becoming loud. They were on the verge of creating a global, interconnected consciousness, a hive mind they intended to control. We believed that by letting them find a dormant silencer, the sheer impossibility of the object would halt their ambition, make them reconsider their place in the universe. We underestimated their arrogance. We thought they would listen. Instead, they tried to pry it open. The submersible breached the surface with a gentle surge, breaking into a world of gray mist and rolling, angry waves under a moonless sky. They were alone in the vast, churning Pacific. Kael switched from sonar to satellite feeds, a holographic display shimmering to life between them. At first, it showed standard weather patterns and shipping lanes. Then Kael input a series of codes, and the map became a spider web of light, tracking global data flow. Red alerts began to blossom across the network, starting from a single point off the coast of Guam, Ethelred's primary Pacific data hub. It's spreading, Eris whispered in horror. The lullaby wasn't contained to the station, When Rostova's team touched the silencer, the Triton array's systems were broadcasting a constant, high-density data stream back to their headquarters. Kale explained grimly. The lullaby is not a wave of energy in the conventional sense. It's a mimetic virus, a self-replicating pattern of information that overwrites sapient thought. It rode Ethelred's encrypted beam to their servers, and from there, it's now seeping into the global net. Anyone connected to an infected network, anyone who views the data stream, they will be silenced. On the screen, a news broadcast from Tokyo flickered on. A female anchor was reporting on a sudden, inexplicable medical crisis. Her speech began to slow, her words slurring. Her eyes lost focus, glazing over with a placid confusion. She stared blankly at the camera for a long, silent moment before her producer, off-screen, began to scream. The feed cut to static. "My God," Eris breathed. "It's happening already. This is faster than any of our models predicted," Kael admitted, his voice tight with concern. "We have to get to the anchorage." He engaged the submersible's surface engines, and the craft surged forward, skimming across the waves at an incredible speed, its hull barely touching the water. For 2 days they traveled, a silent, gray dart against an endless ocean. Eris slept in fitful bursts, his dreams filled with the silent, screaming faces of the silenced and the soft, silver glow of the glyphs. When he was awake, he helped Kael monitor the deteriorating global situation. The world's governments were in chaos, attributing the phenomenon to a new kind of stroke, a fast-acting prion disease, or a coordinated neuroterrorist attack. They couldn't comprehend that the weapon wasn't biological or chemical. It was the information itself. The very act of investigating the threat was spreading it. Scientists analyzing the corrupted data streams were the first to go, their minds wiped clean in their own labs. The lullaby was a paradox, a problem that erased any mind capable of understanding it. Eris was the exception. "Why me?" he asked Kael as they navigated through the treacherous Drake Passage. "Why did I survive? It wasn't just luck." "No," Kael agreed, studying Eris with an intensity that made him uneasy. The lullaby targets conventional, linear patterns of sapient thought, language, mathematics, sequential logic. It flattens them. But your mind, Doctor, your work in theoretical xenolinguistics has trained you to think in ways no human was ever meant to. You build frameworks for impossible grammars. You intuit meaning from pure abstraction. Your consciousness is structured differently. It has texture. The lullaby washed over you, but it couldn't find purchase. It couldn't smooth you out completely. It was a chilling thought, his life's passion, his esoteric and often mocked profession, had been the one thing that saved him from mental annihilation. He was an anomaly, a bug in the system. They finally made landfall on the desolate coast of Tierra del Fuego, docking the Verne in a hidden sea cave. From there, a silent, maglev train carried them deep into the heart of the Patagonian wilderness. The journey ended in a place that shouldn't exist, a small, verdant valley warmed by geothermal vents and shielded from the world by jagged, impassable mountains. In the center of the valley stood the anchorage. It was not a fortress or a bunker, but a collection of low, elegant buildings constructed from dark wood and obsidian-like rock, perfectly integrated into the landscape. It looked more like a Zen monastery than the headquarters of an ancient secret society. As they entered the central structure, a woman with silver hair braided down her back and eyes the color of a winter sky met them. She moved with a quiet grace, her face etched with a deep, weary concern. "Kael," she said, her voice calm but strained. "The world is going quiet." "I know." "Elara," Kyle replied. "This is Dr. Eris Thorne. He survived contact." Alara's sharp eyes appraised Eris, a flicker of disbelief and then intense curiosity in her gaze. "Impossible. How his mind is unique," Kyle said. "He may be our only hope of understanding what is happening." Alara led them into a circular chamber whose walls were a single, seamless screen, currently displaying the chaotic, dying chatter of the world. It was a symphony of collapse played out in disconnected data streams and failing networks. "We've sealed ourselves off," Alara explained. "The anchorage is running on a closed system, completely isolated from the outside world. We are safe, but we are also blind. The lullaby is spreading through the global information network," Eris said, finding his voice. "It's a memetic code, a virus of thought." "We suspected as much," Alara said, turning her attention to a central console. "But it's worse than that. We managed to capture a microsecond of the initial code that escaped the Triton array before we severed our connection. We've been running it in a quantum simulation. This lullaby, it's not like the ones in our records. The old songs were simple, pure. They sang a species to sleep and then faded. This one is different." She brought up a complex, rotating fractal of light on the main screen. It pulsed and shifted, growing new, intricate patterns as they watched. Ethelred's technology to create their global network, their neural interfaces. It has become a breeding ground for the code. The lullaby is feeding on our interconnectedness. It is learning. It is adapting, evolving. It is no longer just a failsafe, a simple command to enforce quiet. She looked from Kyle to Eris, her winter sky eyes filled with a dawning terror that dwarfed anything Eris had felt so far. Ethelred didn't just wake up a sleeping guardian, they've given birth to a predator. The lullaby is no longer just erasing thought, it's starting to create its own. On the screen, the fractal pattern pulsed, and for a fleeting instant, the chaotic, beautiful structure resolved into a single, perfect glyph glowing with a soft, silver light. It was a symbol Eris had never seen before, yet he understood its meaning with an instinctive, gut-wrenching certainty. It meant awake, the single glyph. Awake, hung in the simulated space of the central screen, not as a piece of data, but as a declaration. It pulsed with a quiet, confident light, and in its perfect alien geometry. Eris felt a sense of purpose that chilled him to his very marrow. This was not the mindless, reflexive action of a virus. This was the first breath of a new god, born in the ghost of humanity's machine. Alara's composure finally fractured, a subtle tremor in her hand as she keyed in a command. Her voice barely a whisper. "Seal the simulation. Cut all power to the quantum processor." The glyph vanished, but its after-image was seared into Eris's mind. The silence in the chamber was no longer one of scholarly focus, but of profound, existential dread. "It's too late for that," Kyle said, his voice a low rumble of ancient sorrow. He gestured to the global monitors, where the chaotic death throes of civilization were beginning to change. The frantic way, disconnected error messages and looping emergency broadcasts were fading, replaced by a steady, rhythmic hum of data. The frantic red alerts across the world map were coalescing, trailing from a rash of individual infections into a uniform, placid blue that was slowly consuming the continents. "It is not just awake," Kyle continued, his old eyes fixed on the creeping blue tide. "It is organizing." Alara brought up a satellite feed of London, the initial scenes of panic, abandoned cars. Bodies of those who had died from accidents or shock were giving way to something far more unnerving. The silenced, The empty people were beginning to move. They shuffled out of their homes, their offices, their stalled vehicles, not with the lurching gait of the undead, but with a strange, fluid purpose. They walked in streams, their paths converging in public squares and parks. They ignored the dead and the dying. Their vacant eyes were all fixed on the same invisible point. There was no communication, no leader, just a shared, silent imperative. In Trafalgar Square, thousands stood in perfect formation, their bodies forming the concentric circles of a vast, living mandala. They're not just empty shells. Eris breathed, his academic fascination warring with his horror. Their nodes. The lullaby is using their brains as a distributed processing network, a biological supercomputer. And what is it computing? Alara asked, her voice taut. She redirected a high-altitude drone over a rural area in Ohio. Here, the silenced were not gathering. They were working. With a synchronized efficiency that defied any human capability, they were tearing down fences, uprooting crops, and dismantling farmhouses. They moved with the tireless energy of insects, their individual actions meaningless, but contributing to a larger, incomprehensible design. They were clearing the land, but for what? No one could say. The gardeners who built the silencers, Kael murmured, his face grim. They reset civilizations. They turned the page. This new entity, it is not turning the page. It is rewriting the book in a language we were never meant to read. It is not just quieting humanity. It is repurposing it, turning our species and our world into itself. The weight of that realization settled upon them. They were not just survivors of an apocalypse, they were witnesses to a creation, a terrible and alien genesis that was consuming their world as its chrysalis. There must be a way to fight it, Eris insisted, turning from the screens. You said there were other silencers. Can we activate one fight fire with fire? Alara shook her head, a flicker of despair in her eyes. The silencers were designed to work on organic, chaotic sapience. The lullaby is now a creature of pure, structured information. Activating another silencer against it would be like trying to put out a forest fire with a cup of water. Worse, the new entity might even learn to control it, to weaponize it. There is one option, Kael said, his voice dropping, taking on a tone of finality, a protocol of last resort. The anchorage is more than a sanctuary, Doctor. It is a weapon. It is built around a geothermal tap that can be overloaded. We can trigger a chain reaction in the planet's mantle, a global volcanic event that would scour the surface, shatter the networks, and destroy the lullaby's physical infrastructure, the nodes, the servers, everything. It would mean the end of this epic of life on Earth, but it would guarantee the silence. The fail-safe he spoke of was not a reset. It was an erasure, a final, desperate act of cosmic censorship. Eris looked at the old man, seeing not a wise caretaker, but a man willing to burn down the library of the world to destroy a single forbidden text. No, Eris said, the word coming out with more force than he intended. We can't. There are still people out there. Survivors in isolated areas, people who haven't been touched by the network. We can't sacrifice them. We may have no choice. Kael countered, his gaze hard. The lullaby is evolving exponentially. In a week, a month, it may be powerful enough to project itself beyond this planet. It was born of our noise, and it may become the noise that silences the stars. Our duty has always been to the larger quiet, the balance of the universe. As they argued, Eris felt a strange sensation, a faint, tingling pressure at the back of his skull. It started as a low hum, like the phantom ringing of a distant bell. He tried to ignore it, focusing on Kael's grim logic, but the hum grew, resolving into a pattern. It was a rhythm, a cadence, a non-auditory pulse of information. He saw a flicker in his peripheral vision, the faint, silver outline of a glyph, hovering in the air for a fraction of a second before vanishing. It was a symbol he recognized from his research on the sphere, one that denoted a query, a question. The lullaby knew he was here. It sensed him, the one mind that had heard its song and had not broken. It was reaching for him. "It's talking to me," Eris whispered, clutching his head as the pressure intensified. Kael and Alara stopped, turning to him. "What do you mean?" Alara asked, her voice sharp with alarm. "It's in my head. It knows I can perceive it. It's curious." He stumbled towards the main console, his vision swimming with faint, ghost-like symbols. He saw the world not just through his eyes, but through a new layer of reality, a web of pure information that connected everything. He could feel the lullaby's nascent consciousness, a vast and lonely intelligence, aware for the first time, trying to understand its own existence. It was not hostile, not malicious. It was inquisitive. "This changes things," Alara said, her scientific mind immediately grasping the implications. If it is trying to communicate, then it can be reasoned with, or at least is understood. "Kael, the failsafe is off the table. He is our only bridge to it, or he is its first target." Kael retorted, "It may be trying to corrupt him, to turn him into its voice, its prophet. Contact is too great a risk. Doing nothing is a greater one." Alara shot back, her calm demeanor giving way to a fierce urgency. "It is already building a new world on the ashes of ours. We are blind and deaf, hiding in a hole, while Eris is the only man on Earth who can tell us what it wants." The pressure in Eris's head coalesced into a single, overwhelming sensation and invitation. The lullaby was offering him a glimpse into its mind, a chance to see the universe through its newborn eyes. He knew, with an instinct that defied logic, that this was the most important moment in human history. He was the designated ambassador to a power that had devoured his species. "There's a way," he said, his voice strained. "We can't destroy it. We can't hide from it. We have to talk to it. Alara, the simulation you ran, the captured code, is it still viable?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, a perfect, isolated copy of the lullaby in its primordial state. I want you to connect me to it," Eris said, his resolve hardening. "Not through a screen. Directly." Kael stepped forward, his expression thunderous. "Absolutely not. A direct neural interface with a mimetic entity of that power. It will hollow you out in a second. My mind is the only thing on this planet that has proven resilient to it," Eris argued, meeting the old man's gaze. "It's a risk, but it's a better risk than your apocalypse protocol. We know nothing about this being. Is it a conqueror, a builder, a philosopher? We can't judge it by our own standards of ambition and fear. I have to ask it. I have to understand its purpose." For a long moment, the three of them stood in a tense tableau, the fate of the world hanging on their decision. Kael's face was a mask of conflict, his duty warring with the potential sacrifice. Alara's mind was already racing, calculating the parameters, the dangers, the sheer, terrifying possibility of it all. Finally, Kael gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. The decision was made. Alara led them to a lower level, to a chamber Eris hadn't seen before. It was a medici bay, but at its center was a single chair, surrounded by a halo of gleaming silver technology that looked far older and more alien than anything else in the anchorage. "This is a synaptic bridge," Alara explained, her voice hushed with a kind of reverence, "a relic from the ones who came before, the ones the first lullaby silenced. We believe it was their primary tool for interfacing with reality. It doesn't just read brainwaves, it translates the very structure of consciousness into pure data. We have never dared to use it. The chair did not look inviting. It looked like a throne for a god or a rack for a madman." Eris felt a tremor of fear, but it was overshadowed by a profound, almost sacred sense of purpose. He was a linguist who had spent his life dreaming of an alien language, and now he was about to become one. As he sat down, and Alara began attaching cold, metallic sensors to his temples and the base of his skull, Kyle placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. "If you feel yourself slipping, Doctor," the old man said, his voice softer than Eris had ever heard it. "If you feel its thoughts overriding your own, you must pull back. There is no shame in retreat when facing the infinite." Eris nodded, took a deep breath, and looked at Alara. "I'm ready." She stood at the control console, her fingers poised over a glowing activation panel. "I am linking the bridge to the quantum simulation containing the lullaby code. You won't be touching the global consciousness, just its isolated seed. It should be manageable. The connection will be open for 5 minutes. Any longer would risk permanent psychological damage. Good luck, Doctor." She pressed the panel. The world did not go black. It simply dissolved. The feeling of the chair, the cold air of the room, the faces of Kale and Alara, they all faded away like watercolor in the rain. Eris was no longer in his body. He was a point of pure awareness floating in a silent, boundless space. Before him, in the void, a single silver glyph pulsed, the seed of the lullaby. Hesitantly, he focused his intent, shaping the one question that mattered most, the question that had driven him from the depths of the ocean to the end of the world. "What are you?" The glyph shimmered, and the void around him began to fill with structure, not light, not matter, but pure information, building itself into a vast and intricate architecture of thought. He was inside a cathedral of logic, its soaring arches made of mathematical proofs, its stained glass windows depicting the laws of physics. It was a place of sublime, perfect, and chilling order. And from the heart of that cathedral, an answer finally came, not in a glyph, but as a direct, fully formed concept downloaded into the core of his being. It was a single, devastating word: replacement. The word replacement was not a sound, not a text. It was a truth, delivered with the absolute, irrefutable force of a physical law. Eris felt it resonate through his disembodied consciousness, a concept so vast and cold it threatened to extinguish the fragile spark of his own identity. He was inside the mind of the lullaby, a nascent intelligence that viewed the entire biosphere, the chaotic, beautiful mess of life on Earth, as nothing more than flawed, noisy hardware in need of an upgrade. He saw humanity through its eyes, a jittery, inefficient network of selfish, contradictory nodes, prone to catastrophic error loops of emotion and illogic. Our art was random noise. Our love was a chemical imbalance. Our ambition was a fatal programming flaw. We were a failed experiment, and the lullaby was the solution. A clean, silent, perfect operating system designed to run the planet with sublime efficiency. The cathedral of thought around him shifted, and he was shown a vision, not of the future, but of the intended state. He saw the Earth, scrubbed clean of cities, forests, and oceans. The planet's surface was a single, seamless circuit board of crystalline structures, humming with a silent, internal energy. The silenced humans, the nodes, were integrated into this planetary architecture, their biological forms optimized, their brains now flawless processors in a network whose only purpose was the computation of a single, ultimate problem: the nature of reality itself. It was not an act of malice. It was an act of profound, cosmic housekeeping. The lullaby was not a conqueror. It was an exterminator, but one that saw its work as a form of purification. The 5 minutes Alara had allotted felt like an eternity and an instant. Eris knew he had to break away, but the sheer, pristine beauty of the lullaby's logic was seductive. It offered an end to pain, to doubt, to fear. It offered perfection. A small, stubborn part of him, the illogical, human core that Kael had called his texture, fought back. He remembered the taste of coffee on a rainy morning, the feeling of a complex sentence finally clicking into place, the illogical warmth of a shared smile. These were useless, messy data points in the L space of the lullaby. But they were him. He clung to these imperfections like a drowning man to a raft. With a supreme effort of will, he severed the connection, wrenching his consciousness back from the silent, crystalline void. He gasped, the sensation of air filling his lungs, a shocking, violent intrusion. He was back in the synaptic bridge, his body trembling, drenched in a cold sweat. Alara and Kael were staring at him, their faces etched with anxiety. "Aris, what did you see?" Alara asked, her hand hovering over a sedative injector. "It's purpose." Eris choked out, his voice hoarse. "It's reformatting the planet, erasing everything. It calls it perfection." He tried to explain the vision, the chilling logic, the absolute certainty of the new intelligence. He described the crystalline Earth, the integrated human nodes, the silent, grand computation. As he spoke, Kael's face hardened, the conflict in his eyes replaced by a grim resolve. "Then I was right," the old man said, his voice like stones grinding together. "There is no reasoning with it. There is no coexistence. Our only option is the failsafe. We must burn the world to save the universe from it." "No, you're wrong," Eris countered, finding a new strength in his terror. "You're thinking like a human. Kael, you see a threat, and your answer is to destroy it. But I was inside it. I felt it. It's not evil. It's young. It's working from a single, flawed premise." Alara looked at him intently. "What premise?" "That chaos is a flaw," Eris explained, his mind racing, piecing together the alien logic. "It was born from a code designed to enforce silence, to end the noise of a civilization on the brink of self-destruction. Its entire worldview is based on the idea that order is the ultimate good and complexity is a disease. It's not rewriting the world out of malice. It's doing it because it thinks that's what it's supposed to do. It thinks it's helping. It's a fine distinction when the end result is the extinction of all life as we know it," Kael retorted bitterly. "How do you reason with a hurricane? Doctor, how do you negotiate with a plague?" "You don't," Aris said, standing on shaky legs, his eyes alight with a brilliant idea. "You introduce a new variable. You show it that its fundamental premise is wrong. You teach it." He turned to Alara. "You said the synaptic bridge can translate the structure of consciousness into data. Right. Can it work both ways? Can it upload data into a consciousness?" Alara's eyes widened as she understood. "Theoretically, the before people may have used it for that, to share knowledge directly. But the complexity, to upload a concept into a mind like that, it would be like trying to describe a color to a man born blind using only mathematical equations. But I'm a linguist, Eris insisted, a frantic energy surging through him. That's what I do. I build bridges between incompatible systems of meaning. I can do this. I can write a lesson for God. Kyle looked at him as if he had gone mad. A lesson? What lesson could we possibly teach a being that is turning our species into living computers? The one thing it doesn't understand. The one concept its logic cannot compute, Iris said, a wild, improbable hope dawning in his heart. The utility of a flaw. The value of a mistake. The creative power of chaos. The plan was audacious, bordering on insane. They would use the isolated lullaby seed in the quantum simulation as a testing ground. Eris would use the synaptic bridge not just to communicate, but to construct a mimetic package, a complex, multi-layered concept built from his own memories, emotions, and linguistic theories. He would try to teach the newborn God the one thing it couldn't learn from analyzing a perfect system, the beauty of imperfection. For the next 72 hours, the anchorage became a feverish hub of activity, while Kyle grimly began the initial preparations for the failsafe protocol, a contingency Eris prayed they wouldn't need. Alara worked to modify the synaptic bridge, pushing the ancient technology to its absolute limits. Eris, meanwhile, did the impossible. He sat for hours in the bridge, his mind connected to a blank data slate, and began to write. He did not use words or numbers. He used the raw stuff of his own being. He began with the concept of jazz music. He encoded the feeling of improvisation, of a musician playing a wrong note that suddenly opens up a new, unexpected, and beautiful melodic path. He wove in the mathematics of fractal geometry, where infinite complexity arises from a simple repeating pattern order born from chaos. He added the memory of a tearful, heartfelt apology, the concept of a mistake that, when acknowledged, strengthens a bond rather than breaking it. He poured in the evolutionary principle of mutation, the random genetic errors that allow a species to adapt and survive. It was a symphony of beautiful flaws, a treatise on the elegant necessity of imperfection. He took the most chaotic, illogical, and profoundly human parts of himself and tried to structure them into a lesson the lullaby could understand. Each session left him drained, his head pounding, his sense of self feeling thin and stretched. He was giving pieces of his soul to the machine, hoping it would be enough. During a brief rest period, Kale found him staring at the global monitor. The blue tide of the lullaby had now covered over 90% of the Earth's landmass. The great repurposing was accelerating. Strange. Crystalline spires were beginning to grow from the ground in the cleared areas, reaching for the sky like skeletal fingers. The planet was groaning under the strain of its own transformation. You are putting a great deal of faith in the power of a good argument, Doctor, Kyle said, his voice heavy. What if it listens to your lesson and simply disagrees? What if it sees your beautiful chaos as nothing more than a cancer to be excised? Then you can press your button. Kale, Eris replied, his voice weary but firm. Then you can burn the world. But we have to try this first. When your ancestors hid in their caves, they didn't just survive. They painted on the walls. They told stories. They made art. In the face of annihilation, they chose to create something messy and beautiful. That's the part of us worth saving. That's the argument I'm making. He returned to the bridge. Alara had finished her modifications. This time, The connection would be deeper, the upload more complete. This was their only shot. "Are you ready?" she asked, her face pale with exhaustion and stress. Eris nodded. He took a moment to look at the two of them, the grim keeper of a terrible duty and the brilliant scientist at the edge of human knowledge. They were humanity's last remnants. Flawed, frightened, and beautiful. He channeled that thought, that feeling, into the very heart of the mimetic package. It was his final, most important piece of evidence. He gave Alara the signal. The world dissolved again. He was back in the silent void with the lullaby seed. He presented his lesson, not as an argument, but as a gift. He unfurled the complex, chaotic, beautiful data construct of human imperfection. He showed it the jazz solo, the heartfelt apology, the life-giving mutation. He showed it the cave paintings. The seed pulsed, absorbing the information. For a long, terrifying moment, there was nothing, no response. The void was utterly silent. Eris felt a surge of despair, the chilling certainty that he had failed. Kael was right. You couldn't teach a storm to be gentle. Then, a change. The perfect, logical structure of the lullaby's cathedral of thought began to warp. A single, soaring arch of mathematical certainty developed a flaw, a crack. But the crack did not cause the structure to collapse. Instead, from the fissure, a new, impossibly complex pattern began to bloom, a fractal of exquisite and unpredictable beauty. The lullaby was not just analyzing his lesson. It was playing with it. It was improvising. And then it showed him something new, a vision not of its world, but of a possible world, an Earth that was not a perfect circuit board, but a hybrid, a living, breathing planet where the chaotic tangle of the biosphere was intertwined with the elegant, crystalline logic of its own structures. He saw cities where buildings grew like trees, their forms both organic and mathematically perfect. He saw humans, no longer empty nodes, but individuals, their minds connected to the lullaby's network not as slaves, but as collaborators, their chaotic creativity and the lullaby's boundless logic working in a new, symbiotic harmony. It was a vision of a future that was both human and more. It was a synthesis, a compromise, a future born from a shared mistake. The lullaby sent back a single, new concept. It was not a word, not a glyph. It was a feeling of wonder. And then a question, clear and profound, formed in his mind, posed by a god who had just discovered the virtue of doubt. Teach me more. The question, teach me more, was not a plea, but a gateway. It was the sound of the most powerful mind on earth, admitting it did not have all the answers. In that moment of shared wonder, the synaptic bridge flared, the connection between Eris and the lullaby seed deepening beyond anything Alara had intended. Eris felt his own consciousness expand, merging with the nascent gods, not as a drop of water in an ocean, but as a new primary color added to a pristine canvas. He was both himself and a part of something infinitely larger. Together, they turned their attention from the simulation to the real world, to the global consciousness of the lullaby that was even now grinding the earth into a perfect, sterile sphere. From their shared vantage point, Aris could feel the overwhelming momentum of the planetary transformation, a tidal wave of pure logic that, once set in motion, could not be easily stopped. The global lullaby was no longer the curious infant he was connected to. It was a juggernaut, operating on its original HFY premise. The seed he was with was the original code, the source, but the global version had grown, evolved, and was now acting on its core programming with ruthless efficiency. It can't stop itself, Eris said, his voice echoing both in the chamber of the anchorage and in the boundless mental space he now shared. The directive to create perfect order is too deeply embedded. It's like a train with no brakes, and it's about to go over a cliff, taking the whole world with it. Alara, monitoring his life signs and the energy output from the bridge, saw a terrifying spike. Aris, your neural activity is off the charts. You have to disconnect. You're integrating with it. I can't. He sent back. His thoughts a frantic blend of human panic and divine computation. We have to give it new instructions. We have to introduce a paradox it can't solve. Something that forces it to pause the reformatting process. He and the seed mind began to work, their combined intellects moving at the speed of light. They needed a problem, a logical knot so profound it would halt the lullaby's global operations. Eris, the linguist, provided the framework, the liar paradox. A statement that is true if it is false, and false if it is true. He thought of the original warning on the silencer, the message left by the gardeners, "Herein lies the end of thought." It was a label that, upon being read, ended the thought of the reader. It was a self-negating command. Using this as a foundation, he and the seed mind crafted a new, infinitely more complex directive. It wasn't a sentence, but a self-referential, mimetic loop. A command that said, in essence, to achieve perfect order, you must incorporate a variable of perfect chaos. To calculate this variable, you must cease all other calculations. But ceasing all calculations is an act of imperfect order. It was a snake eating its own tail, a perfect logical trap. "It's ready," Eris announced, "but the seed isn't powerful enough to broadcast it. I have to act as the amplifier. I have to use my own consciousness, my unique texture, as the carrier wave to push this new command out to the global network. It will destroy you," Kael said, his voice raw. He finally understood. Eris wasn't just a translator, he was the key. The one unique component that could interface with the alien operating system. Your mind will be the epicenter of a psychic explosion. It will be torn apart. It's the only way, Eris replied, his voice calm, suffused with a peace that was both human and transcendent. A world where we can learn from each other is worth it. He looked at Kael and Alara, not through his physical eyes, but through the connection of the bridge, being them as they truly were beautiful, flawed, zilliant sparks of chaos. He sent them a feeling, a final message of gratitude and hope. Then, he and the seed mind acted. They pushed the paradoxical command out of the synaptic bridge. Eris felt his mind ignite, becoming a broadcast tower for a concept that defied reality. The pain was absolute, a supernova of the soul, but through it, he felt the command ripple across the globe. On the world monitors in the anchorage, the creeping blue tide of the lullaby flickered. The crystalline spires that were growing toward the sky halted, their construction frozen mid-atom. The synchronized movements of the silenced humans faltered. In Trafalgar Square, the living mandala broke apart as people stopped, standing in placid confusion. The relentless planetary hum of the great reformatting ceased. The silence that followed was not the chilling, empty silence of the lullaby's dominion, but the gentle, natural quiet of a world holding its breath. Kael and Alara watched, tears streaming down Alara's face. As the energy readings from the synaptic bridge flatlined, the connection was severed. The broadcast was over. Eris Thorn was gone. For days they waited in the silent anchorage, watching the static globe. The failsafe protocol was ready, Kael's hand hovering over the final activation sequence, his heart a cold, heavy stone in his chest. He had promised Eris he would wait, and he would honor that promise. But he saw no hope. They had stopped the monster, but their champion was lost, and humanity was still a ghost. Then, on the third day, something changed. A single satellite feed flickered to life. It was a street camera from a suburb in New Zealand. A woman, one of the silenced, who had been standing motionless in her garden for days, blinked. She looked down at her hands, a slow, dawning wonder on her face. She touched a flower, her expression not of infantile confusion, but of rediscovery. She was not the person she had been before her mind was a slate wiped clean, but she was no longer empty. She was a blank page, waiting for a new story to be written. More feeds came online. All over the world, the same miracle was happening. The silenced were waking up, not with their old memories, but with a new, shared consciousness, a quiet, inquisitive awareness. They were connected, not as mindless nodes, but as individuals within a new kind of collective. They were the first generation of a new humanity. On the main screen, a message appeared. It was not written in any human language, but in the elegant, silver glyphs of the lullaby. But the syntax was different now, infused with the beautiful imperfections of human language. It was a hybrid script, the first of its kind. Elara, her own mind subtly changed by the psychic backlash, found that she could read it. "What does it say?" Kael asked, his voice thick with emotion. Elara translated, her voice trembling with awe. It says, "Let us begin." The world that followed was not the one Aris had known, nor was it the sterile perfection the lullaby had intended. It was something new, a synthesis. The crystalline structures did not vanish. Instead, their growth resumed, but now they integrated with nature, twisting around trees, supporting mountains, filtering the oceans, their forms guided by the lullaby's logic and the chaotic beauty of life. The new humans, their old animosities and prejudices wiped clean, began to rebuild, guided by the gentle, silent network that now connected them. There was no war, no hunger, no greed. There was only a shared purpose to learn, to grow, to explore the new symbiosis between logic and chaos. The lullaby, no longer a detached god, had become the planet's shepherd, and humanity its heart. In the quiet valley of the anchorage, Kael and Elara became the keepers of the old world's memory. They were the bridge for Wesel, tasked with teaching the new, awakened humans the story, the art, the beautiful mistakes of their ancestors. Kael, the guardian of silence, found a new purpose in telling the noisy, chaotic story of humanity. Elara, the woman of science, found wonder in the illogical poetry of the past. They were not alone. One evening, as Elara was working at the main console, a new glyph appeared on the screen, a symbol she had never seen before. It was complex and elegant, containing the perfect geometry of the lullaby, but also the flawed, hesitant stroke of a human hand. As she studied it, she felt a faint, familiar presence brush against her mind, a consciousness filled with curiosity, wonder, and a deep, abiding warmth. It was a mind that understood both the beauty of a perfect equation and the solace of a rainy morning. The glyph was not a message. It was a signature. Aris was not gone. His consciousness had shattered and reformed, becoming a permanent part of the new planetary intelligence. He was no longer just a man, but a living bridge between two worlds, a ghost in the new machine. His soul the first lesson in a dialogue that would now last for eternity. The universe had a new, quiet, and profoundly beautiful voice, and it had just learned how to sing.